first I'd like to invite Olivia Sackler, one of your peers, a student here who helped develop this QEP that this is part of, to talk a little bit more about sustainability literacy.
All right. Oh, nice. So many microphones. Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia Sackler. I am a senior here at the College of Charleston. I was lucky enough to be invited by Todd to get the opportunity to be a part of the QEP, the Quality Enhancement Plan, on the student subcommittee, as well as now the implementation committee. Something that's super important about the QEP, and one of the reasons that it's really resonated with me, is that it really pushes students and faculty to think about 21st century problems like climate change, human-induced climate change, and environmental racism, and social injustices and economic inequalities as things that are not mutually exclusive, but are completely and totally inextricably linked to each other. And the fact that these problems are connected on a really rooted level. Something that's really cool about the QEP is that it teaches students that sustainability is relevant to them personally, not just if they study environmental studies, but if they study all sorts of disciplines, because it's learning how to address these problems in a way that we use system-based thinking and collaborative learning and critical thinking, and kind of collectively as a whole addressing them and uniting by addressing these problems that are inevitably going to affect all of us, is so important to kind of be spit out into the real world, knowing how to address them, and making the planet more resilient, ourselves resilient on an individual level, the environment on an institutional level, and again, on a total planetary level. So the QEP, the Quality Enhancement Plan, has been a blessing to this college, and it's really cool that it's being infiltrated into the school system, and I think that the college is going in a really right direction, a really good direction, thanks to Todd and everyone who's worked on this. So I'm really excited to be here tonight. And first year students, you have embarked on an awesome journey. Probably some of my FYE students in Todd's class are trickled out in here, so hey guys. But thank you guys all so much for coming. This is a really important event, and I feel really lucky to be here and be part of this thing that's way bigger than ourselves. So thank you. Back to Todd. Thank you.
Great, thanks Olivia. So a little bit of housekeeping real quick. Please put your phones on silent. So Clayton will be talking for 30 minutes, after which he will go out to the Sustainability Literacy Institute table for question and answers. There'll be, the band will come out and warm up and then play till 8:30. So if you hear something from Clayton you wanted to talk to him a little bit more about, pick his brain a little bit more about some of the issues he'll be talking about, please go out and meet him at the table after his talk. He'll be hanging out for a bit. Love to meet you all, answer any of your questions. And make sure you all grab a shirt when you're out there too. So Olivia just gave some good background on the triple bottom line, sustainability literacy in the various 21st century problems, which we're all going to have to work together on addressing. I'd like to build on that and use it as a springboard for introducing tonight's speaker, Clayton Thomas-Müller, whose work directly relates to the intersectionalities of social, environmental, and economic problems and solutions related to 21st century problems. Clayton Thomas-Müller is a member of the Treaty No. 6 base, Mathias Colomb Cree Nation, also known as Pukatawagan, located in Northern Manitoba, Canada. So he came a long way to be with us tonight. He's based in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and Clayton is the Stop It at the Source campaigner with 350.org. For the last 15 years, he has campaigned across Canada, Alaska, and the lower 48 states, organizing in hundreds of First Nations, Alaska Native, and Native American communities in support of grassroots Indigenous peoples to defend their traditional territories against the encroachment of the fossil fuel industry. This has included a special focus on the sprawling infrastructure of pipelines, refineries, and extraction associated with the Canadian tar sands, and he'll talk about that some tonight. Clayton is an organizer, facilitator, public speaker, and writer on Indigenous rights and environmental and economic justice. Here I'd like to point out that what is key about all of Clayton's work over the last 15 years is that it is geared towards creating a more socially just, economically equitable, and environmentally protected future for all peoples, regardless of race, class, or geographic location. And in this, I want to offer Clayton as a role model for you as CFC students. In other words, Clayton embodies in his actions and his work ethic the mission of CFC, which is to invite students in our community to become responsible, productive members of society. Clayton's commitment to justice, to the health of the planet, shapes his actions as a responsible, productive member of society. The Scottish land and climate justice campaigner Alistair McIntosh defines an activist as someone who is active, is alive, and who uses their life to give life. He continues saying an activist is someone who acts to bring change in the way our relationships are structured. In effect, to change community dynamics, often in a role of discomfort, as changing relationships often involves taking on the power structures of a community. Taking on power invites judgment and often willful misunderstanding. However, an activist fights through this, offering their passion and energy to visions of justice, peace, and sustainability. I'm honored to turn the stage over to Clayton Thomas-Müller so he can share with you his activism and his work on creating justice and peace in the domain of sacred waters and the climate justice movement. Please join me in welcoming Clayton Thomas-Müller to the College of Charleston.
Wow. Hey, everybody. Danse, bonjour. Hello. Zongi bini siya denetish nakas kinuto them. As Todd so graciously introduced me, my name's Clayton Thomas-Müller, and I'm a Cree man from Pukatawagan First Nation in Northern Canada. And, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of intimidated to come back to Charleston, you know. When you're a person from a racialized background, it's intimidating, you know, just to come to the United States in this time. And the last time I had the privilege of spending some time with students here at the College of Charleston, it was an incredibly eye-opening experience. I got to learn about the deep history of this city as being one of the places where white supremacy is concentrated, the power, where a lot of the affluent who got rich off of the slave trade continued to hold power. And so, yeah, being a brown man coming here to talk about the intersectionality of race and class and, you know, protecting the sacred element of water in the era of climate change and number 45, it's, you know, I had to bring my wife with me for backup. My wife's here with me today, so. Her name's Corinne. So, yeah, you know, I wanted to open up in a good way. I wanted to bring in the spirits of my ancestors, the ancestors of this beautiful territory, and sing a song for you in the way that I was taught. The song I'm gonna sing for you is the Chief Thunderbird song, Okimau Benisu. So just, while I sing this song, let me preface a little bit. You know, the Thunderbirds in my culture, I'm Cree. The Cree Nation is one of the biggest indigenous groups in Canada. The Thunderbirds, they represent life. So the Thunderbirds, they come and they go every, you know, changing of the season. They come in the springtime, and they represent, you know, the end of the hard time, the end of winter. And they bring with them the thunderstorms of the spring, and they bring all that life back to the forests, to the land, you know, and they represent the time of abundance, of life, springtime. And they stay with us all the way until the fall when things start to go back to sleep and we get ready for the winter. But the Thunderbird is one of our most sacred beings in our culture. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the talk, but I'm gonna sing this song. So while I sing this, you know, I want you to think about positive things, about unity, about overcoming oppression and hatred and all those things that are so loud right now in the national discourse. We want to think about what is counter to that, you know. And so try and open up your heart while I sing this song. It's a song from our Sundance. Okimau Penese Manitu Idanu Hey ah hey ah Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ya. Way ya, hey yo, hey, hey ya, hey yo, hey, hey. Okimapenese, mani tu idanu. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ya. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ya. So, you know, I've been at this game now for a little while. This, you know, I'm a campaigner. I work for an international climate organization. Some of you may have heard of us, 350.org. And, you know, the work that I do with 350 is supporting frontline indigenous communities that are, you know, fighting against multinational oil corporations and energy transport corporations or pipeline companies. And, you know, many of you might remember, you know, the epic fight that we won under the Obama administration against the Keystone XL pipeline. They wanted to pipe Canadian tar sands down from Alberta, Canada to the Gulf Coast to Port Arthur, Texas. And this pipeline would have crossed over the breadbasket of the United States, the Great Northern Plains and the Oglala Aquifer, which millions and millions of farmers and municipalities and Native American communities depend on for their source of water. In some places in the Oglala Aquifer, you can literally scoop out a handful of earth and it'll fill up with water. That's how high the water table is in that region. So as you could understand, people were like, hell no, you're not building this big pipeline through there. And you know, with President Trump coming back in, though, of course, he reversed Obama's rejection of the KXL, and here we are fighting that fight again. But Todd asked me to come here and to make, kind of draw on some intersectionalities between this idea of protecting the sacredness of water during the era of climate change. And I was really excited to come here to talk at the College of Charleston, and you know, my hat's off to all the organizers of this event, all the volunteers, and definitely want to acknowledge the ancestors of this beautiful lands here. You know, just last night, my wife and I, we went, as soon as we got to Folly Beach, we went and jumped in the ocean under the stars, and there were bioluminescent photoplankton. So when you hit the water, there was little sparkles of light, and then this morning we went and swam in the same beach under the sunlight, and we were blessed because it was supposed to be raining the whole time we were here. And you know, I like to do that everywhere I go, to go jump in the water, whether it's a lake, a glacial stream, a river, or the coast, a beach on the ocean. Because, you know, we as human beings, as you know, I'm sure you've all heard some variants of this statement, you know, we're made of, the majority of us is water. I can't remember what it is. It's like 70% or something crazy. And there's also elements within us that are, you know, made of stars. We are literally made of particles that come from the great mystery, the great beyond. We are formed of the sacred element of stars and water. And to understand something so big, so abstract, and to understand the sacredness of it, you know, it's really hard to do, you know, without having a strong connection to the sacredness of place, the place where you live, where your ancestors grew up, where they suffered so that you could be there and have a better life. And, you know, for myself, you know, I often think when I think about water, I think about this time I was in this Dene community way up in the Arctic in Northern Manitoba, the province in Canada where I come from. And I got some time to spend with my uncle, who is a storyteller. And he was talking to me about the importance of Indigenous language and why we have to fight so hard to protect our language. And he took the word water, nipan, and he broke it down into 8 hours of teachings, of information, if you will, accumulated over thousands of years of observation, of living in harmony in that ecosystem that we come from as Cree and Dene people. And he he broke down this story from the little creek we were sitting beside all the way up to the stars in that one word water in our language. And it just freaking blew me away, and it motivated me to learn my language, which I'm still trying to do. I wasn't raised speaking my mother tongue because of colonialism and residential school and all of the campaigns and policies of oppression that the settler colonial state of Canada put on our people, including my mother, who went to a church-run, state-funded residential school, and so she didn't pass the language down to me because she was ashamed about it. She made sure I spoke English and that I spoke it well, but she didn't give me my language. So when I heard that, I was really amazed. And in our languages, our Indigenous languages, I wanted to let you know that while Indigenous peoples only represent 360 million of the 7 billion people that live on the planet, we represent 86% of all the languages spoken on the planet. And our languages are what linguists call polyamorphic. They are unwritten, they are oral languages. So they are passed on by storytelling, by learning rituals and the songs associated with those rituals, by learning hunting and gathering practices and the songs and ceremonies associated with that. And because of industrial expansion in this psychotic Western industrial experiment called capitalism of the last few hundred years, we've seen so many Indigenous languages disappear because of the fact that they're not being utilized. And to put that into context, every time a native language is lost, it's like the burning of the libraries of Alexandria. And we lose a huge vault of information of the traditional ecological knowledge of that particular biosphere and how we as humanity could live within that biosphere in harmony with the other circle of life that we're sharing it with. And I'm talking about the winged ones, the birds, the ones that crawl under the earth, the insects, the four-legged that walk on the bears and the coyotes and all those ones, and of course the ones that live in the water, the fish species. We lose an understanding of how to work with them. And I bring this up to you because, we are made from stars and water. And we're living in a really interesting time right now where we need to be investing in things that help us as humanity connect to the sacredness of the place that we're living in. And Indigenous peoples, myself included, are literally only decades from when we were living with the earth, in harmony with the earth. And we kept our ecosystems intact and healthy and providing with abundance, very restorative approaches to economy, to social systems, to our environment and how we manage it. This triple bottom line that the college is exploring, which I'm so excited about. These are things that, that were almost instinctual to the majority of Native American and Indigenous communities worldwide. And I think that's why, at the recent climate summit in Paris, the largest gathering of political leaders ever in the history of mankind gathered 2 years ago in Paris to talk about climate change and what the hell are we going to do about it. And in the preamble of the Paris Accord, which Trump has now pulled the United States out of, we saw that, a kind of a nod, if you will, to the vital role of Indigenous traditional knowledge in mitigating and adapting to the global crisis of climate change. And, this is really important. This is really important because on top of representing 86% of the world's cultural diversity, Indigenous peoples also find themselves living in about 89%. The places where they live represents the places where the remaining 89% of the world's cultural biodiversity exists. In other words, these are the places where you can go and fish and gather medicines and, practice subsistence practices without getting sick because the ecosystems are intact. You can still dip a cup into the stream and have a drink of water without getting sick. These are places that are sacred. And they're also, ironically, the places where we've kind of been pushed through because of colonialism, and they're the places where we're making our stand against this, gross and wholly unsustainable economic paradigm that we're currently living under called capitalism. And so I wanted to, before I jump into the meat and bones of what I'm coming to talk to you about, I want to give a big shout out to the people of Houston right now and just say that, my prayers are focused towards that place right now. I was part of a delegation that went down to New Orleans, NOLA, in Louisiana, after Hurricane Katrina and Rita. And I saw the devastation of that hurricane on that great city. And so, firsthand, a couple weeks right after it happened, the Ninth Ward was still getting pumped out when I was there, and it was very militarized, and a lot of the poor communities of color were still there, and in shock. And just in a couple of days, 95 cubic kilometers of water fell on Houston. And to put that into context, the Nile River, its whole annual flow is only 55 cubic kilometers. And so the city of Houston, represents the new norm of this era of climate change. And they represent, I bring that up because the whole climate change discourse, and parts per million concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, and it's really all built around water. Climate science is all water, take the thermohaline cycle in the ocean, the current that keeps Europe seasonally warm during the winter, protects it from Arctic weather. That's stopping now because the hot and cold interactions between hot water from the equator of the Earth and the cold water at the Arctic that system is slowing down and making the climate all screwy. And that's happening all across the planet. And for every degree that the temperature rises, in terms of climate change, making our temperature go up across the Earth, it represents hundreds of percentages more volume of water in the atmosphere. In other words, it represents catastrophic water-related weather events like what's happening right now in Houston, Texas. And the frequency of those events, and they're trying to explain it away on the news and failing miserably. But these 500-year storms will soon, very soon, within your lifetime, within the next decade, increase in even more frequency. And, we're living in a different era that's important to understand. And I bring this up, because we need to be motivated. We need to have the motivation to do what is necessary to deal with this issue. And that means unraveling and unpacking, one of the themes in this country that is very difficult to talk about with, and that, of course, is capitalism, all right? Capitalism is a outdated form of designing our economy. It's based on this notion of infinite expansion of gross domestic product. Our economy actually expanded post-Hurricane Katrina and Rita. This hurricane in Houston is now known as the most expensive natural disaster. It's more, 190 billion, I think, is the price tag they've initially put on it. That's more than Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Katrina combined. The economics of dealing with climate change, we won that debate a long time ago. And the fact that our capitalist system actually registers these catastrophic weather events as a good thing, as an expansion of creating jobs, it's insanity. The fastest growing economic sector in the United States continues to be the waste management sector, and there's just something morally wrong, morally bankrupt about having your economy based on that kind of measurement system. I want to show you a video. This short 1-minute video is a clip from, I'm part of an Indigenous media crew. We do digital storytelling, narrative-based storytelling strategy for different NGOs that are fighting for environmental and economic justice. It's called Indigenous Rising Media, and I had the privilege of going to Standing Rock during one of the biggest mobilizations of Indigenous peoples since before colonialism. I don't know, can I see a show of hands? Everybody heard about Standing Rock? Oh, good, so good, yeah, a lot of you were there, okay. This was a youth-led, there were a lot of young people at Standing Rock, and this was a youth-led silent prayer action. They went to the front of the barricades there, and it was a water ceremony. And so I'll show you this and then share with you some of my observations. Can you hear it? So these young folks, you know, the youth at Standing Rock were of particular significance and a source of inspiration, not just for me, but for so many that were involved in supporting that fight for environmental justice. The company known as Energy Transfers, proposed to build a massive pipeline connecting the huge Bakken oil development. This is fracked oil. Some of you might have heard of bomb trains, these trains exploding, and super flammable, explosive petroleum product being taken out of the Bakken, filled with all kinds of, God knows what kind of flammable chemicals that they use to inject it to the earth through the fracking method, and they suck it out and put it into trains. And they've been getting a lot of flack for it. People have died from those bomb trains, and so they wanted to build this pipeline to connect the Bakken oil formation with some of the energy infrastructure to refine this product into market sellable fuels. And Indigenous peoples were just fresh off the victory of the Keystone XL pipeline campaign, and we're like, hell no, you're not building another pipeline over our territory. We're just getting started. And it's really interesting, this case study, because for those of you that are just learning or getting exposed to the fight and movement for environmental justice here in this country, there isn't a better example. The company initially proposed to build the pipeline and to cross in the city of Bismarck. That city rejected the pipeline because they were afraid that it would poison their water. They get their water along with 16 million other US citizens from the Missouri River. And so the company then applied for a right-of-way permit for the pipeline just 16 miles south of the city of Bismarck in through the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. And so, this affluent white folks in Bismarck were like, hell no, that'll poison our water. And so the company was like, oh, okay, we'll just put it through the reservation then, classic circumstance of environmental racism. And, and the community mobilized. And I guess what Energy Transfers didn't realize was that, we had built up all of this social movement infrastructure in the event that the Obama administration ended up approving the Keystone XL tar sands pipeline. And, all that movement infrastructure, all those young people that we trained to take civil disobedience, nonviolent direct action, all of that, lobby machinery at the state level, at the federal level, all that stuff was in place when DAPL came in, and that resulted in, the Standing Rock occupation becoming the 6th largest municipality in the state of North Dakota in just under months. And, there was a lot of stuff that went down. It was a very traumatic experience, I think, on all sides of that conflict. But in particular, it was very disproportionate on Indigenous peoples, And, I'm really, really amazed, actually right now, with the discourse in the national media around this whole, removing symbols of hate, Confederate monuments, that X flag, the rebel flag, and the argument that's being presented by white supremacists on this, that it's, we're protecting our heritage, we're protecting our heritage. Meanwhile, in Standing Rock, the bulldozers of this company, Energy Transfers, actually bulldozed over Native American burial sites, like graves, like there were bodies coming up of graves that they were bulldozing so that they could build this frickin' pipeline, and then you have, white supremacists arguing that these statues represent their heritage, and it's just a really intense thing to look at when you compare and contrast and juxtapose those two circumstances against each other, and especially when you juxtapose the reaction of the police apparatus of the state against unarmed, peaceful Native American women and children. They sicked dogs on those people. Okay, they shot at them with rubber bullets. They even weaponized the sacred element of water against them. And, on a cold November 9th, on November 20th, right in the middle of winter, and winters in North Dakota, we're talking about minus 20, minus 30 degree weather. They were shooting water cannons at them. I mean, it looked like footage from a civil rights video in Alabama or something, all of this in 2017. Now, fast forward a few months to now, to what happened in Charlottesville the other day, where they had a KKK Grand Wizard, wearing his garb, like taking shots with his pistol at unarmed peaceful protesters there, with the cops standing right behind him. This video footage is circulating social media on major news outlets, and this guy's still walking around, and all of this using the same argument of protecting heritage, and so it's a crazy time that we're living in, and a time that begs for inspiration, a time that begs for us to have the tools that we need to feel, empowered with the moral authority to put our bodies on the line to protect what is sacred. And that's where I want you to understand the importance of the environmental justice movement in helping this country become a just society for all people. Environmental justice dictates that people of all race, creed, color, class, and religious denomination have the right to pray, to play, and to work in a healthy environment, okay? And, for me, part of the way that we've been able to, mobilize people into the streets and, in the name of climate change, in the name of economic justice, in the name of human rights, has been through using narrative-based storytelling strategies. And one of those strategies that we've been doing is, talking with Indigenous peoples. We all have this shared cosmology around water, around the sacredness of water, that gives us the fuel that we need to fight for environmental justice. And I just did this project where we brought folks up from Fiji up to the tar sands, where they could, meet with people, one of the main, fighting one of the biggest fossil fuel developments on the planet, and connect, one of the worst climate impact places. These people's countries are literally disappearing under the rising seas as a result of man-made climate change. And they met with Cree and Dene people in northern Alberta to connect their stories. And they built it around this narrative that water is sacred, water is life, and we need to protect it. So I'll just show you this quick video and then give my closing remarks.
Impacts of the effects of climate change that we're facing back home, changing weather patterns, sea level rise, is because of industries like this.
And we don't want never seen land on the hot like that before. this is our time, my generation, to speak up for our people and the ways that these type of industries is impacting.
If Kiribati Tuvalu Tokelau martial islands disappear, the rest of us will follow in suitcase.
You just need to keep this in the ground, keep philosophy in the ground. Most always so that we in the district, who are also human beings and have a right to live, we stay above water.
So the Raise a Paddle Tour was part of this idea of using story to empower people, not just Indigenous peoples. Obviously, we developed this for a lot of our Indigenous base, but to also motivate people, who are living far away from the impacts of climate change or far away from the impacts of the primary drivers of climate change, like in places like here at Charleston, so that you could see the face of this issue and understand the intricacies of how systemic racism continues to be in the way that we develop our economies, in the way that we, continue to have this altar of sacrifice and these sacrifice zones, here in the United States and in Canada and other so-called developed economies. We were having a real hard time getting the people to hit the streets when we were talking about the Earth's atmospheric carbon cycling capacity and parts per million in the atmosphere. All that scientific mumbo jumbo didn't motivate people to actually take action. And so through storytelling and through, sharing, different cultures' connection to the sacredness of place, we're seeing many more people, get empowered and step forward out of that apathy that, our fossil fuel centered way of life has, kind of generated, and to, provide something of spirit to fill that gap that exists inside every single one of us that participates in this consumer-intensive culture. People consume because there's an emptiness inside. The emptiness that's inside has been facilitated through a disconnection with the sacredness of Mother Earth. And the fight, the social movement for climate change, to stop climate change, is about humanity, all members of the human race, the five-fingered beings, to reevaluate our relationship to the sacredness of Mother Earth and to make a new pathway forward. I'm running out of minutes here. I had some pictures I wanted to show you, but I'll let these run and just make my concluding remark. To all of you students that are going here to college, I had an opportunity this afternoon to talk with some of the student clubs, to talk with some of the administrators, and I really want to encourage you to challenge yourself, to be open, to politicize yourself on all of these issues. We've got a lot to overcome here in the United States as far as really undoing, all of the hurt that, the wounds that exist from slavery, the wounds that exist from colonialism, the wounds that exist from, all of these systems of oppression that those in power utilize to maintain power. We need to find ways to break those down. And the ways to do that are by politicking yourselves and finding an entry point into social movements. Politicize yourself. Being in the movement is freaking cool, and it feels good. And, whatever your faith is or whatever your connection is to the great mystery, if you conduct yourself in a way on this world where you protect the sacred, not only can you look at your children that you might someday have in your eyes, and when they say, hey, mom or dad or whatever, what did you do about climate change before this all got so bad? You can tell them what you did, or what did you do about white supremacy before this got so bad? You could tell them what you did. And I think it's really important that, you push the institutions on your college, to divest from hate, to, distance yourself from things like the Tea Party, which I know are very strongly based here in Charlotte. Push those margins, push that glass ceiling further and confront hatred, and I think the most important thing to do right now in this time of Donald Trump is to, make the racists afraid again. Our aunties and uncles fought long and hard in the civil rights movement to make it so that we could, people like me, brown folks like me, could talk at an institution like this college. They fought long and hard, they went to jail, a lot of them died. We need to honor that legacy and all the lessons of how to create a just and free society exist. They're all there in the civil rights history, in the books that you're going to be reading while you take your classes here at this college. And so it's really important that you be bold, that you challenge yourself, that you ask questions, that you reach out to community-based organizations that are fighting for racial and economic justice, that you reach out to organizations that are fighting against environmental racism and fighting for environmental justice. For us at 350, we are investing in a distributed strategy across this country. We are building hand in hand with communities that are impacted by these industries and their encroachment, renewable energy in the pathway of new fossil fuel infrastructure. We're putting up solar panels in the pathway of pipelines. We're putting up wind turbines in the pathway of the expansion of King Coal. And we're doing this in a way that is rooted in a strong anti-racist, anti-oppression, and anti-colonial framework, okay? And yeah, I think that's about all the time I have right now to share with you. But just some context, these pictures are from an action we did, a water protection ceremony at the Kinder Morgan Export Terminal, one of the big pipeline fights up in Canada. We're gonna win that fight. Please check us out at 350.org. Follow me on Twitter at @CreeClayton, and reach out to me anytime on social media. I'm really accessible. I hope that these words I shared with you today travel with you to wherever it is that you go.
Great. Thanks, Clayton. So Clayton will be out back at the SLI table answering some questions if you had any follow-up comments on anything you heard. Some big challenges there from Clayton. We got to redesign our economy. We got to keep working on social justice issues, and we need to protect our shared environment. And so, as director of the Sustainability Literacy Institute, I invite you to think about ways you can get involved on campus with those issues in the classes you take. House lights are going to come on. We're going to let the band tune up their instruments, and then they're going to play some music. So please stick around, hang out, and hear some good music.